A 911 call comes in. Active shooter at a high school. From that moment, everything moves fast. And I mean fast. Patrol units, tactical units, emergency services, SWAT teams are activated. The school goes into lockdown. Parents start getting calls. Every officer arriving at that scene has one mission: stop the threat before someone gets killed. And then they find a teenager holding a water gun playing a TikTok game called Senior Assassin. That scenario played out multiple times this week, right here on Long Island, in Chicago, in Indiana, in Massachusetts, and in North Carolina. I'm Mike Blangiforti, a retired NYPD Detective Squad commander, and today I want to talk about why this game is far more dangerous than anyone's telling you, and why the most alarming part of this story isn't making the news. Let me explain what actually happens the moment a 911 call reports an active shooter at a school. Especially post-Columbine, post-Sandy Hook, law enforcement doctrine changed fundamentally. We no longer contain and wait. We go in immediately. The entire mindset shifted to every second you wait, someone dies. So when that call comes in, officers aren't arriving to assess the situation calmly. They are arriving to engage a threat. Every person they encounter is evaluated in a fraction of a second. Now, put yourself in that officer's position for a moment. You're moving through a school hallway. You turn a corner. A teenager is standing there holding what looks like a firearm. You have less than a second to decide. That officer has a legal right and a professional obligation to respond to the threat in front of them. They can't wait to see if it's a water gun. By the time they know for certain, it could be too late. And the resources behind that single 911 call are significant. All of it triggered by a TikTok game. Nassau County Police Commissioner Patrick Ryder confirmed this week that his department responded to two separate active shooter reports at Long Island high schools. Both turned out to be senior assassin games. A lockdown was just called a couple of days ago at Plain Edge High School here in Nassau County, Long Island. 2 teens were suspended. A third incident was reported in Hampton Bays after a resident reported a teenager with a long gun, which was later identified as a water gun. This is not a prank. This is a law enforcement event every single time that 911 call goes out. Now let me talk about the teenagers involved, because I don't think most of them understand what they're actually risking. In Portage, Indiana, an 18-year-old named Adrian Williams was waiting outside a gym to squirt a classmate with a water gun he purchased on TikTok Shop. Someone called 911. When police arrived, 4 or 5 officers had their weapons drawn and pointed directly at him. Williams was arrested, charged with felony intimidation, and spent 3 nights in jail. He now faces the potential loss of a college scholarship over a water gun game. In Massachusetts, a teen was charged with assault after shooting gel projectiles at students who weren't even playing the game. In Illinois, an 18-year-old was charged after a suburban elementary school went into lockdown. Now, here's what I need young people and their parents to understand. The moment a 911 call goes out reporting an active shooter, this stops being a game. It now becomes a law enforcement event. And law enforcement events have legal consequences, sometimes serious ones. Felony charges could be brought. They could show up on college applications, job applications, background checks, military service screenings. One afternoon of playing a TikTok game can redirect the entire trajectory of a teenager's life. And here's something else. Parents can face civil liability when their child's involved in an incident that triggers an emergency response. That's a conversation most families haven't had or had the need to. Now, I'm not trying to be an alarmist. I'm simply pointing out what this could turn into. Now, I want to talk about something that nobody else is discussing. And from my perspective, this is the most important part of this entire conversation. When you normalize hundreds of teenagers running around with realistic-looking guns in neighborhoods, near schools, in parking lots. You create something very dangerous. It's called complacency. In other words, people start to assume, oh, it's probably just senior assassin. School staff start to assume. Bystanders start to assume. And in some cases, even first responders may hesitate for a fraction of a second longer than they should because the game has now preconditioned everyone to expect that a student with a gun might just be playing. In other words, what could happen if it's not the game? I spent my career studying criminal behavior and threat assessment. I used to give active shooter lectures across the region, and I can tell you that most people who carry out acts of mass violence don't act entirely on impulse. There's almost always a period of ideation, of thinking, planning, fantasizing even about it. Now, when a game like Senior Assassin goes viral, it plants a seed. For the vast majority of kids, it means nothing more than just a fun game. But for a student who already has a propensity for violence, who was already in that ideation phase, this game provides a blueprint. It shows them exactly how to move through a community and at school with a realistic-looking weapon without immediately triggering alarm. It shows them how people react or don't react. It shows them the gaps. I'm not saying the game causes violence, but this is a conversation school administrators, parents, and law enforcement need to be having right now. So, how did we get here? How does a water gun game become a nationwide law enforcement crisis in a matter of weeks? TikTok. Now, the Senior Assassin game has existed in various forms for years as a low-key senior tradition. What changed is the platform. TikTok's algorithm is specifically designed to identify content that generates engagement, views, shares, comments, and push it to as many people as possible, as fast as possible. What it doesn't do is evaluate safety. It doesn't consult with law enforcement. It doesn't ask whether a trend could trigger school lockdowns or get a teenager shot. It rewards what goes viral. And Senior Assassin, kids running around with realistic guns, dramatic chases, eliminations, close calls is exactly the kind of content that goes viral. Water guns for the game are now being sold directly on TikTok Shop, and they're getting frighteningly and increasingly realistic looking, tactical looking, indistinguishable from real firearms at any meaningful distance. Law enforcement officials across the country have confirmed this. Now, here's what I want parents to understand about TikTok specifically. The platform's primary demographic is teenagers. Its algorithm is optimized to keep teenagers engaged, scrolling, and participating. It has no built-in filter for whether a trend is dangerous. No law enforcement consultant, no school safety expert. Your teenager is being targeted deliberately and algorithmically by a platform designed to make trends spread faster than consequences can catch up to them. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a business model. So let me close with something practical, because this episode isn't just about analysis, it's also about safety. So if your teenager is playing Senior Assassin or is even thinking about it, here's the conversation you need to have right now. First of all, the water gun matters. Brightly colored, clear-looking, toy-like water guns are significantly less likely to trigger a 911 call than realistic, tactical-looking ones. If they're going to play, the equipment they choose is what matters. The realistic stuff has real consequences. Second, location matters. Playing near schools, police stations, in moving vehicles or on private property dramatically increases the legal and physical risk. Multiple arrests this month have involved exactly those situations. Third, and here's the most important one, If a police officer encounters your teenager holding any kind of gun, real or fake, the rules are simple. Stop moving. Listen to commands. Keep your hands visible. Announce clearly and loudly that you're holding a toy. Don't raise it. Don't make any sudden movement. Always completely comply with law enforcement direction. I can't stress this enough. And finally, have the conversation about following viral trends blindly. TikTok will push the next dangerous trend to your teenager's phone, whether you're ready for it or not. So the best protection is a teenager who has been taught to ask, what are the real world consequences of this, before they participate. Law enforcement didn't create this problem. Communities didn't create this problem. Parents didn't create this problem. A social media platform that algorithmically targets teenagers with viral trends and profits from their engagement, regardless of the consequences, created this problem. And the consequences land on officers who have to make split-second decisions, on teenagers who face felony charges, on the families who get 911 calls about active shooters at their child's school, and on communities that have to mobilize an entire emergency response for a water gun game. I'm Mike Blangiforti. This is Truth, Investigations, and Criminal Behavior, where we deal in facts, not speculation, and where we have conversations that matter. If this episode was useful to you, share it with a parent. Subscribe, follow, like for more command-level analysis of real investigations and real public safety issues. And drop your questions in the comments. I do read every one. And most importantly, stay safe. I'll see you next time.